I stood at my grandmother's 80th birthday party, watching my sister Grace receive endless praise for her recent promotion at a marketing firm, while family members literally stepped around me to get to her. 28 years of being invisible next to my charismatic sister had trained me to expect this treatment. When my uncle asked Grace about her amazing apartment, my jaw clenched with familiar resentment. The conversation buzzed around her accomplishments while I remained unnoticed in the corner, just another piece of furniture in the room. Then Grandma Helen suddenly turned to me with genuine curiosity, asking where I lived now, and I realized this moment would change everything forever. Growing up in suburban Chicago, I learned early that being the smart kid meant being the forgotten kid. While Grace charmed teachers and classmates with her bubbly personality, I buried myself in books and computer programming, earning straight A's that my parents Robert and Linda barely acknowledged. During high school, Grace won homecoming queen, while I took first place in the state programming competition. Guess which achievement got framed and hung in our living room hallway? My father Robert, an insurance executive with graying temples and a perpetual tie, always talked about Grace's people skills like they were the eighth wonder of the world. He would lean back in his leather recliner during dinner, gesturing with his fork as he explained to anyone who would listen how Grace just had this natural ability to connect with others. My mother Linda, a real estate agent whose blonde highlights never seemed to fade, would nod enthusiastically and add stories about Grace's latest social triumph. Meanwhile, my accomplishments in computer science were dismissed as just playing with computers. When I showed them the mobile game I had coded in my senior year of high school, which actually got downloaded by 3,000 users, my dad glanced at my laptop screen for maybe 5 seconds before turning back to Grace's cheerleading photos. College made things worse. Grace joined a top-tier sorority at Northwestern and spent 4 years attending parties, networking events, and spring break trips that my parents funded without question. Her Instagram feed became a constant stream of group photos where she glowed at the center of laughing crowds. My parents shared every single post on their own Facebook pages with captions like, "Our social butterfly" and "Grace living her best life." I earned my computer science degree from Illinois Institute of Technology. With a 3.9 GPA, completed 2 internships at respected tech companies, and graduated summa cum laude. My parents attended the ceremony, but spent most of it talking about Grace's upcoming job interview at a Chicago marketing firm. During the family dinner afterward, they asked me exactly one question about my future plans before launching into a 20-minute discussion about whether Grace should take the marketing position or wait for something better. The pattern continued after graduation. Grace landed her marketing coordinator job and suddenly became the family success story. Every holiday gathering, every birthday party, every random family barbecue centered around Grace's latest workplace achievement or romantic development. She dated a string of guys who my parents treated like visiting royalty, hanging on their every word about careers and ambitions. I moved into a tiny studio apartment in Lincoln Park and started freelancing as a software developer. The work paid decently, but my parents seemed convinced I was wasting my education. During family dinners, they would ask half-hearted questions about my computer work before immediately shifting focus to Grace's promotion opportunities or her latest boyfriend's impressive job. The worst part was watching extended family gatherings where relatives would swarm around Grace asking about her exciting life while completely ignoring my presence. Uncle Mike, a broad-shouldered construction foreman with calloused hands, would slap Grace on the back and tell her how proud he was of her success. Aunt Susan, a pediatric nurse with kind eyes and prematurely gray hair, would spend entire conversations discussing Grace's relationship drama and career moves. When relatives did acknowledge my existence, it usually involved some variation of "still doing the computer thing, Apollo," followed by immediate disinterest in my response. I started declining family invitations, claiming work commitments or prior plans. Nobody seemed to notice my absence anyway. But during this time of family isolation, I was secretly working on something bigger than any of them could imagine. For 3 years, I had been developing a dating app called Authentic, designed specifically for people who struggled with traditional social networking. The idea came from my own frustration with apps that prioritized photos and superficial connections over genuine compatibility. I worked 18-hour days in my cramped studio apartment, surviving on instant ramen and determination. While Grace posted about wine tastings and weekend trips, I was coding algorithms that would help introverted people find meaningful relationships. The app focused on personality compatibility, shared interests, and conversation quality rather than just physical attraction. My parents assumed I was just unemployed and playing video games. Grace would send me occasional texts asking if I needed help finding a real job, always with an undertone that suggested she was doing me a huge favor by even acknowledging my existence. She had no idea that I was building something revolutionary while she was planning office happy hours and weekend brunches. The isolation hurt more than I wanted to admit. Sometimes I would catch myself refreshing Grace's social media posts, watching her collect dozens of likes and comments on the most mundane updates. Her announcement about getting promoted to senior marketing coordinator received 47 congratulatory comments and hundreds of reactions. When I had quietly launched the beta version of Authentic 6 months earlier, I had exactly 0 family members who even knew it existed. Living alone in my studio apartment, surrounded by multiple monitors and empty coffee cups, I began to realize that maybe being overlooked had actually been a gift. Without the pressure of family expectations or the distraction of constant social validation, I had been able to focus entirely on creating something meaningful. The app was gaining users, steadily growing from hundreds to thousands to tens of thousands of people who found real connections through my platform. But the resentment was eating at me. Every family gathering where I watched Grace bask in praise for achievements that paled in comparison to what I was building in secret made me angrier. I started fantasizing about the moment when I could reveal the truth, imagining their shocked faces when they realized they had been completely wrong about my life. The breaking point came when I discovered that Grace had been actively spreading lies about my situation. Through a cousin's accidentally forwarded group text, I learned that Grace had been telling extended family members that I was unemployed and living in our parents' basement. She had embellished stories about my supposed failures to make herself look even better by comparison. 6 months before Grandma Helen's birthday party, everything changed overnight. Authentic exploded in popularity after a tech journalist wrote a glowing review calling it the future of online dating. Within 2 weeks, we went from 50,000 users to over 10 million. Venture capitalists started calling my phone constantly, offering valuations that made my head spin. Marcus Chen, a distinguished venture capitalist in his mid-30s with silver-rimmed glasses and an understated confidence, became my mentor during the funding process. He had built 3 successful startups himself and understood the unique challenges of sudden wealth. During our first coffee meeting at a downtown Chicago cafe, he asked me point blank why I was keeping my success secret from my family. I explained the years of being overlooked and dismissed, how they all assumed I was a failure working on useless computer projects. Marcus leaned forward, his expression serious, and told me something I will never forget. He said that family dynamics often reflect our own self-worth, and that keeping my achievements hidden was just another form of accepting their dismissive treatment. The app's valuation reached $50 million after our Series A funding round. I owned 60% of the company, which meant my net worth had jumped from basically zero to $30 million in a matter of months. The numbers felt surreal, like they belonged to someone else's life. I used a small portion of my newfound wealth to purchase a penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park in Manhattan. The 3-bedroom unit on the 42nd floor of a luxury building came with floor-to-ceiling windows, a private terrace, and a view that stretched across the entire park to the Upper West Side. The purchase price of $4.8 million was pocket change compared to my company's valuation, but it represented everything my family had assumed I could never achieve. Sophia Martinez, an interior designer with an eye for understated elegance, helped me transform the space into something that reflected my personality rather than just my bank account. She selected furniture that combined comfort with sophistication, creating rooms that felt lived in rather than staged. The home office she designed featured custom shelving for my computer equipment and a sitting area where I could think through complex coding problems. My wardrobe underwent a similar transformation. Instead of the bargain bin clothing I had worn for years, I invested in well-tailored shirts, quality jeans, and a few expensive suits for business meetings. I hired a personal trainer who helped me build confidence along with muscle mass. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I looked the part of a successful entrepreneur. But the most significant change was psychological. I started attending tech industry events where my intelligence and achievements were not only recognized but celebrated. Other entrepreneurs sought out my advice on app development and user experience design. Investors competed for my attention. For the first time, I experienced what it felt like to be valued for my actual contributions rather than dismissed as background noise. James Wright, my business attorney, and a sharp-dressed man in his mid-40s became another trusted advisor during this period. He helped me navigate not just the legal complexities of running a fast-growing company, but also the personal challenges of newfound wealth. During one of our meetings, he warned me that revealing my success to family members who had previously dismissed me could create complicated dynamics. Throughout this transformation, Grace continued sending me condescending text messages about my computer hobby. She had been promoted to senior marketing coordinator and never missed an opportunity to share her achievements while subtly implying that I was still struggling. Her messages always carried an undertone of pity, as if she was generously maintaining contact with her loser brother out of family obligation. The irony was overwhelming. While Grace celebrated landing a $55,000 a year marketing job, I was quietly running a company valued at 10 times her annual salary every single month. Her biggest professional achievement was organizing a successful product launch that generated $200,000 in revenue. My app was processing millions of dollars in subscription fees while helping hundreds of thousands of people find genuine relationships. I made a conscious decision to keep my success hidden from my family until I felt ready to handle their inevitable dramatic reactions. Part of me wanted to protect the purity of my achievement from their sudden attention and potential manipulation. Another part of me was planning the perfect moment to reveal everything, imagining their shock when they realized how completely wrong they had been about my life. The app continued growing at an explosive rate. We hired a team of talented developers, customer service representatives, and marketing specialists. I moved our headquarters to a sleek office space in downtown Manhattan, complete with modern workstations, collaboration areas, and a break room that would make Google jealous. Managing a team of 30 employees while maintaining the app's core mission of authentic connections became my full-time obsession. But the family lies were getting worse. Through various social media posts and casual conversations with mutual friends, I discovered that Grace had been telling everyone I was not only unemployed, but actively borrowing money from our parents to survive. She claimed I had dropped out of college, been fired from multiple jobs, and was generally a disappointment to the family. These stories served to make her own modest accomplishments seem even more impressive by contrast. The breaking point came when I learned that Grace had been using my childhood achievements as her own backstory when meeting new people. She told Tyler Rodriguez, her current boyfriend, who played bass guitar in an unsuccessful indie band, that she had won programming competitions and science fair awards in high school. She was literally stealing credit for my accomplishments while simultaneously telling family members that I was a failure. The discovery filled me with a cold rage that surprised me with its intensity. For years, I had accepted being overlooked and undervalued, but actively having my achievements stolen while being painted as a loser crossed a line I didn't even know existed. Grace was not just neglecting to defend me against family dismissiveness. She was actively contributing to it while building her own reputation on lies about my actual successes. As Grandma Helen's 80th birthday approached, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of continuing to hide my success, I would attend the party and wait for the perfect moment to reveal the truth. Not to show off or seek revenge, but to finally establish the reality of who I was and what I had accomplished. The app's valuation had grown to $75 million just 2 weeks before the party, making my net worth approximately $45 million. I owned a penthouse in Manhattan, ran a successful company that was changing people's lives, and had built genuine friendships with brilliant entrepreneurs who valued my mind and vision. But my own family still thought I was a basement-dwelling failure who couldn't hold down a job. It was time to correct that misunderstanding once and for all. 2 weeks before Grandma Helen's birthday party, I decided to investigate exactly how extensive Grace's lies had become. What I discovered was far worse than I had imagined. She had created an elaborate fiction about my life that painted me as not just unsuccessful, but as a cautionary tale of wasted potential and family embarrassment. I started by calling Aunt Susan, my father's sister, who worked as a pediatric nurse at Children's Hospital. Susan had always been kind to me during my childhood, and I remembered her as someone who actually listened when kids talked. When I mentioned that I had heard some confusing stories about my education, she hesitated before admitting that Grace had told her I had dropped out of college during my junior year because I couldn't handle the workload. The lie was so specific and cruel that it took my breath away. Not only had I graduated summa cum laude, but Grace knew exactly how hard I'd worked for my degree. She had attended my graduation ceremony and listened to our parents discuss my job offers afterward. Yet she had deliberately invented a story about me being a college dropout and spread it to extended family members. Uncle Mike, my mother's brother who ran a construction company, was even more direct when I called him. He asked if I was finally ready to get serious about finding real work instead of playing computer games all day. When I pressed him about where he had gotten that information, he explained that Grace had told him I had been fired from several programming jobs for incompetence and attitude problems. According to Uncle Mike, Grace had painted a picture of me as someone who thought I was too good for honest work, but who kept failing at every opportunity. She had specifically told him that I refused to learn from my mistakes and blamed my employers whenever things went wrong. The fictional version of me was not just unsuccessful, but also arrogant and delusional about my own abilities. Cousin Jennifer, Uncle Mike's 22-year-old daughter, who was studying business at DePaul University, provided the most heartbreaking revelation. She told me that Grace had explained my long absences from family gatherings by claiming I was too embarrassed to face everyone because I had been borrowing money from our parents to pay rent. According to Grace, I was financially dependent on Robert and Linda, but too proud to admit it or seek help getting my life together. Jennifer's voice carried genuine sympathy as she offered to help me update my resume or practice interview skills. She had been avoiding talking to me at family events because Grace had warned her that discussing career topics might make me defensive about my failures. The kindness in Jennifer's offer made Grace's lies even more painful because it showed how my extended family would have supported me if they had known the truth about my situation. The web of deception was intricate and purposeful. Grace had not just told random lies about my life. She had crafted a comprehensive narrative that served multiple functions. It made her own modest achievements seem spectacular by comparison. It explained away my absence from family events without anyone questioning why I might be avoiding them, and it positioned her as the successful child who was generously tolerant of her disappointing brother. But the most devastating discovery came when I learned that Grace had been stealing my actual childhood achievements to enhance her own backstory. Tyler Rodriguez, her current boyfriend, was a 24-year-old bass guitarist whose indie band played coffee shops and small venues around Chicago. He was struggling financially and living with 3 roommates in a cramped apartment in Wicker Park. Through mutual friends in the Chicago music scene, I learned that Grace had told Tyler she had been a programming prodigy in high school, winning multiple state competitions and earning early admission to prestigious universities. She claimed to have turned down computer science programs to pursue marketing because she wanted to work with people rather than machines. The story made her seem both brilliant and selflessly focused on helping others. These were my actual achievements. I had won the Illinois State Programming Championship 2 years in a row during high school. I had received early admission offers from MIT, Stanford, and Carnegie Mellon. I had chosen Illinois Institute of Technology specifically because their program focused on practical application rather than pure theory. But Grace had rewritten that decision as her own magnanimous choice to prioritize human connection over academic prestige. Tyler apparently found this backstory incredibly impressive. According to friends who knew him, he often bragged about dating someone who could have been a tech genius, but chose to use her intelligence to help businesses connect with customers instead. He saw Grace as someone who had made a noble sacrifice, giving up potential wealth and fame to do meaningful work in marketing. The irony was staggering. While Grace was using my real achievements to impress her struggling musician boyfriend, she was simultaneously telling our family that I was a failure who couldn't maintain employment or handle basic adult responsibilities. She was literally living 2 completely contradictory lies about the same person. Her motivation became clear when I considered her own insecurities. Grace's marketing coordinator position was entry-level despite her impressive title. She earned $55,000 a year in a field where true success required either exceptional creativity or strong analytical skills. Her natural charisma had gotten her hired and helped her navigate office politics, but she lacked the deeper talents needed for significant advancement. Dating Tyler also highlighted her limitations. While she had always attracted attention from successful men during college and her early 20s, she was now approaching her mid-20s with nothing substantial to show for her social advantages. Tyler was charming and artistic, but he was also financially unstable and living a lifestyle that offered no security or prestige. By stealing my achievements and spreading lies about my failures, Grace created a narrative where she was both the brilliant child who had chosen a more humanitarian path and the successful sibling who was patiently tolerating her disappointment of a brother. She got to feel superior to me while using my actual accomplishments to feel superior to others. The cruelty was breathtaking, but it also clarified something important about our family dynamics. Grace was not just accidentally favored by our parents. She was actively manipulating information to maintain that favoritism. My years of feeling overlooked and undervalued were not just due to my introverted personality or their preference for social achievements. Grace had been deliberately undermining my reputation to protect her own status as the golden child. Discovering the full extent of her deception filled me with a determination I had never felt before. For years, I had accepted being treated as background noise, assuming that my family's dismissiveness reflected some failing on my part. Learning that Grace had been actively contributing to that treatment while stealing credit for my actual successes changed everything. As I prepared for Grandma Helen's birthday party, I knew that simply revealing my financial success would not be enough. Grace had spent years building a false narrative about both of our lives, and that narrative needed to be comprehensively dismantled. She had been playing a game where she made the rules and controlled the information, but she had no idea that I had been quietly building something that would change the entire playing field. The app's latest milestone provided the perfect opportunity. Just 3 days before the party, Authentic had reached 15 million active users, and received coverage in the Wall Street Journal as one of the year's most innovative startups. The article mentioned my background and vision for authentic human connection in an increasingly superficial digital world. My real achievements were finally getting the recognition they deserved, and my family was about to learn that everything they thought they knew about my life was completely wrong. Grandma Helen's 80th birthday party was held at Meridian Banquet Hall, an elegant venue in downtown Chicago, with crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River. The guest list included 3 generations of family members, from great-grandchildren to Helen's surviving siblings, creating a crowd of about 40 people dressed in their finest clothing for the milestone celebration. I arrived wearing a charcoal gray suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, but the cut was understated enough that it read as simply well-fitted rather than obviously expensive. My Italian leather shoes were polished to a mirror shine, and my haircut was sharp without being flashy. I looked successful but not ostentatious, which was exactly the impression I wanted to create. The family's reaction to my arrival was predictably underwhelming. My cousin David, an accountant in his late 20s, with thinning brown hair and a methodical personality, nodded politely as I walked past but immediately returned to his conversation about tax season preparation. Aunt Patricia, Grandma Helen's daughter who taught elementary school, smiled warmly but briefly before turning back to a discussion about upcoming retirement plans. Nobody seemed to register that my appearance had dramatically improved since our last family gathering 6 months earlier. The weight training had added 15 pounds of muscle to my formerly skinny frame, and professional styling had transformed my wardrobe from discount store basics to investment pieces that fit properly. But families see what they expect to see, and everyone expected me to be the same overlooked younger brother who had always faded into the background. Grace made her entrance 20 minutes later with Tyler in tow, and the energy in the room immediately shifted. She wore a flowing emerald dress that complemented her auburn hair, and her natural charisma drew people toward her like a magnet. Tyler, dressed in dark jeans and a vintage band t-shirt under a thrift store blazer, looked uncomfortable, but determined to make a good impression on Grace's family. Within minutes, Grace had collected a small crowd of relatives, eager to hear about her latest professional achievements and relationship developments. She spoke animatedly about her recent promotion to senior marketing coordinator, describing the increased responsibilities and creative challenges with the kind of enthusiasm that made her job sound far more impressive than it actually was. Uncle Mike, wearing his best polo shirt and looking slightly out of place without his usual work boots, clapped Grace on the shoulder and told everyone within earshot how proud he was of her success. Aunt Susan hugged Grace tightly and asked detailed questions about her new office and whether she was getting along well with her supervisor. Even relatives who saw Grace only once or twice a year seemed genuinely invested in the minutiae of her career progression. I stationed myself near the appetizer table, watching the familiar family dynamics play out exactly as I had expected. Nobody asked about my life or work, but several relatives made brief eye contact and offered polite nods that acknowledged my presence without expressing any real interest in my circumstances. I had become so accustomed to this treatment that it barely registered as painful anymore. Tyler remained close to Grace throughout these early conversations, occasionally contributing details about her accomplishments or asking thoughtful questions about various family members. He seemed like a genuinely nice guy who was trying to navigate the social complexity of meeting his girlfriend's extended family. The tragedy was that everything he had been told about Grace's background was either exaggerated or completely fabricated. The gift exchange provided another opportunity to observe family priorities in action. Grace presented Grandma Helen with an expensive pearl necklace that generated enthusiastic praise from multiple relatives. The pearls were beautiful and thoughtfully chosen, but the presentation felt more like a performance than a genuine gesture of affection. When my turn came, I handed Grandma Helen a handmade photo album that I had spent weeks assembling. The album contained pictures spanning 8 decades of her life, from childhood photos her own children had never seen to recent images from family gatherings. Each section included handwritten notes about the memories and people captured in the photographs. The gift cost almost nothing in monetary terms, but represented hours of careful research and personal attention. Grandma Helen's reaction was immediate and emotional. Her eyes filled with tears as she turned through pages that chronicled her entire life story, and she pulled me into a tight hug while thanking me for creating something so meaningful. Several relatives gathered around to look through the album, expressing amazement at photos they had never seen and stories they had forgotten. But the moment passed quickly, and attention returned to Grace's more expensive and socially impressive gift. The pearl necklace was something that could be admired and discussed, while the photo album was intensely personal and harder for the group to appreciate collectively. Within 10 minutes, the conversation had moved on to other topics, and my gift was carefully set aside for later private enjoyment. The champagne toast provided the most painful demonstration of family dynamics. Robert stood up with his glass raised, beginning a speech about how proud he and Linda were of both their children. But his words focused almost entirely on Grace's achievements, her bright future, and her wonderful boyfriend who was clearly devoted to her happiness. Grace glowed under the attention, standing gracefully beside Tyler while accepting congratulations and compliments from every corner of the room. She recounted her success story with practiced ease, describing her journey from college sorority president to marketing professional with natural storytelling ability that held everyone's attention. During this recitation, I noticed Grace, including details that belonged to my actual background rather than hers. She mentioned winning academic competitions in high school and receiving scholarship offers from prestigious universities. She talked about having to choose between pursuing technical excellence and working with people, ultimately deciding that human connections were more important than individual achievement. The irony was devastating. Grace was literally using my real accomplishments to enhance her fabricated success story, while I stood 10 feet away being ignored by the same people who were applauding her fictional achievements. Nobody in the room had any idea that the inspiring narrative about choosing people over prestige was actually my story, not hers. Uncle Mike raised his own glass and added comments about Grace's exceptional people skills and natural leadership abilities. He specifically mentioned how impressed he was that she had turned down opportunities in more technical fields to focus on marketing work that helped businesses connect with their customers. Every word of praise was based on lies that Grace had told about my actual decisions and achievements. Tyler beamed with obvious pride in his girlfriend's accomplishments, and several relatives made comments about what a lovely couple they made. Grace had clearly presented herself to Tyler as someone whose intelligence and achievements matched his artistic ambitions, creating a relationship built on fundamental deceptions about her actual capabilities and background. The champagne toast concluded with general applause and multiple conversations breaking out about Grace's bright future and impressive trajectory. I remained near the appetizer table, nursing my drink and observing the celebration of my sister's fictional achievements with a mixture of anger and dark amusement. Then Grandma Helen, who had been quietly watching the festivities from her seat at the head table, turned her attention directly to me. Her bright blue eyes, still sharp despite her 80 years, focused on my face with the kind of genuine interest that I rarely experienced from family members. The room's volume level meant that most people were engaged in their own conversations and not paying attention to our interaction. But Grace, who was standing close enough to overhear, glanced over when she heard Grandma Helen addressing me directly. Grandma Helen's question cut through the noise and chatter with surprising clarity. She asked where I was living now, explaining that she had lost track of my current situation and wanted to make sure she had my correct address for sending birthday cards and holiday greetings. The question was simple and practical, but it represented the first time all evening that anyone had asked for specific information about my current circumstances. Grace's conversation with Tyler paused as she turned to listen to my response, probably expecting me to mumble something about still searching for better opportunities or living temporarily with friends. The room didn't exactly fall silent, but enough conversations paused that several relatives were positioned to overhear whatever I said next. This was the moment I had been unconsciously preparing for during months of secret success and family neglect. I looked directly at Grandma Helen, maintaining the same casual tone I had used for every other interaction that evening, and told her I lived in just a little penthouse overlooking Central Park. The effect of my words was immediate and dramatic. Grace, who had been taking a sip of champagne while listening to my response, suddenly choked and spit the liquid across the front of her emerald dress. Tyler's confused expression shifted between Grace and me, clearly trying to process what he had just heard and why his girlfriend was having such a violent reaction. Linda's face went completely white, as if all the blood had drained from her body in the space of 2 seconds. Her champagne glass trembled in her hand while she stared at me with an expression that suggested she was seeing a ghost or experiencing some kind of medical emergency. Robert's mouth fell open slightly, creating the kind of slack-jawed look normally associated with cartoon characters experiencing shock. Uncle Mike let out a low whistle and said, "Well, well, well," with the tone of someone who had just discovered that everything he thought he knew about a situation was completely wrong. His construction worker instincts seemed to recognize authentic confidence when he heard it, and his expression shifted from patronizing dismissal to genuine curiosity about what other surprises might be coming. Grandma Helen, however, simply nodded, as if my response confirmed something she had suspected all along. Her bright blue eyes sparkled with what looked like satisfaction, and she asked follow-up questions about which neighborhood I lived in and whether I enjoyed the city lifestyle. Her reaction suggested that, unlike everyone else in the family, she was not surprised to learn that I had been successful. The immediate aftermath was a symphony of stuttered questions and desperate attempts to understand how I could possibly afford a penthouse apartment in Manhattan. Robert recovered his voice first, asking if I had won the lottery or received some kind of inheritance that the family didn't know about. His tone carried an undercurrent of suspicion, as if he was trying to determine whether I was lying or had somehow acquired money through questionable means. Linda's questions were more practical, but equally bewildered. She wanted to know when I had moved to New York, how long I had been living there, and why I had never mentioned such a significant change in my living situation. Her voice carried hurt alongside confusion, as if she was trying to understand how her own son could keep such important information secret from his family. Grace's recovery from her champagne-spitting incident was slower and more complicated. She kept glancing between me and Tyler, clearly calculating how my revelation affected the elaborate fiction she had constructed about our respective life situations. Tyler was watching her reactions carefully, and I could see him beginning to question whether everything she had told him about her family was accurate. I maintained the same casual, understated tone that had characterized my entire evening. I confirmed that yes, I did live in Manhattan, and yes, the apartment had a nice view of Central Park. When pressed for details about how I could afford such a place, I mentioned that I had been working on a small software project that had turned out reasonably well. The phrase "small software project" was such a massive understatement that I almost smiled while saying it, but it served my purpose of revealing information gradually rather than overwhelming everyone with the full scope of my success all at once. I wanted them to process each revelation before moving on to the next surprise. Uncle Mike, whose construction background had taught him to recognize quality when he saw it, started asking more specific questions about the building and neighborhood. His curiosity seemed genuine rather than skeptical, and he mentioned that he had worked on several luxury construction projects in Manhattan and understood the kind of money involved in those properties. Aunt Susan approached the conversation with her characteristic kindness, expressing excitement about my success, while asking whether I was happy with my new living situation. Her questions focused on my personal satisfaction, rather than financial details, which made her response feel more supportive than intrusive. But the most significant development was watching various family members pull out their phones and start searching for information about my supposed software project. In today's world, successful tech entrepreneurs typically generate news coverage and online articles that can be easily found through basic internet searches. Cousin David, whose accounting background made him naturally analytical, was the first to find articles about Authentic and my role as founder and CEO. His expression shifted from skepticism to amazement as he read through coverage in TechCrunch, the Wall Street Journal, and other business publications that had featured my company during its rapid growth phase. Within minutes, David was showing his phone screen to other relatives, reading excerpts from articles that described Authentic as a revolutionary dating platform that was changing how people formed meaningful relationships online. The articles mentioned the company's $50 million Series A funding round and its rapid growth to over 10 million active users. The family's reaction to this independent verification was profound and uncomfortable. These were not claims I was making about my own success. These were objective news reports from respected business publications confirming that I had built something genuinely significant and valuable. Grace's discomfort became increasingly obvious as more relatives discovered the news coverage of my company. She kept trying to steer conversations back to other topics, but the family was too fascinated by this unexpected revelation to be easily distracted. Tyler was reading over David's shoulder, learning details about my background that contradicted everything Grace had told him about her family dynamics. The moment that truly changed everything came when Uncle Mike, who had been reading about Authentic on his own phone, suddenly looked up with an expression of complete amazement. He announced to the entire group that he had been using my app for the past 6 months without having any idea that his nephew had created it. Uncle Mike explained that after his divorce 2 years earlier, he had tried several dating apps without much success. Most platforms seemed designed for younger people and focused primarily on casual hookups rather than serious relationships. Authentic had been different from the beginning, matching him with women who shared his interests and values rather than just his geographic location and age preferences. He pulled up the app on his phone and showed it to other family members, explaining enthusiastically about the personality, compatibility features, and the conversation quality metrics that helped users identify genuine connections. His endorsement carried special weight because it was completely independent of family loyalty. He was praising the app's functionality based purely on his own positive experience as a user. The revelation that Uncle Mike had been unknowingly using my creation for months, while simultaneously believing I was unemployed and unsuccessful, created a moment of cognitive dissonance that nobody could ignore. Here was objective proof that my work was not only legitimate, but actually valuable enough that family members were choosing to use it without even knowing about my connection to the product. Grace's fabricated narrative was beginning to crumble in real time. Tyler was asking her quiet questions about why she had never mentioned her brother's success, and her responses were becoming increasingly defensive and contradictory. Other relatives were expressing amazement that they had been completely unaware of such significant achievements by a family member. But the final revelation was yet to come, and I could see Grace recognizing that her carefully constructed lies were about to be exposed in the most public and humiliating way possible. The family gathering she had expected to dominate with stories about her modest marketing promotion was turning into a celebration of achievements she had been actively concealing and misrepresenting for months. Grace's composure finally shattered completely. Her face flushed red with a combination of embarrassment and rage as she realized that her years of lies were about to be exposed in front of Tyler and the entire extended family. She turned toward me with blazing eyes and demanded to know why I had kept my success secret, accusing me of deliberately making her look bad by hiding my achievements. Her voice rose above the general conversation level drawing attention from relatives across the room who had been engaged in their own discussions about my unexpected revelation. Grace's natural charisma, which had always worked in her favor during family gatherings, now worked against her as everyone focused on her increasingly emotional outburst. She accused me of being selfish and vindictive, claiming that I had intentionally allowed family members to worry about my well-being, while secretly living a luxurious lifestyle in New York. Her words carried a desperate edge, as if she was trying to reframe the situation to make herself the victim of my supposed deception rather than the architect of a much more serious campaign of lies. But I'd spent months preparing for this moment, and I responded with the same calm tone I had maintained throughout the evening. I pointed out that Grace herself had been telling everyone I was unemployed and living in our parents' basement, so it seemed strange that she was now upset about not knowing the truth about my actual circumstances. The comment hit its target with devastating precision. Several relatives turned to look at Grace with confused expressions, clearly trying to reconcile my statement with their own understanding of my situation. Aunt Susan asked Grace directly whether she had really been telling people I was unemployed, and Grace's stammered response confirmed what everyone was beginning to suspect. Tyler stepped closer to Grace, his expression shifting from confusion to concern, as he began to understand that his girlfriend had been lying about fundamental aspects of her family relationships. He asked Grace quietly why she had told him that her brother was a college dropout who couldn't hold down a job, referencing conversations they had apparently had about my supposed failures. The question created a moment of absolute silence in our immediate area. Grace had been caught in a direct contradiction between the stories she had told Tyler and the reality that was being revealed at the party. Her face went pale as she realized that Tyler now knew she had been lying to him about basic facts regarding her own family. I decided that this was the moment to reveal the full extent of Grace's deception. Speaking clearly enough for all nearby relatives to hear, I explained that Grace had been telling extended family members a series of increasingly elaborate lies about my education, employment, and financial situation over the course of several years. I calmly recounted how Grace had told Aunt Susan that I had dropped out of college, told Uncle Mike that I had been fired from multiple jobs for incompetence, and told Cousin Jennifer that I was borrowing money from our parents to pay rent. Each revelation was met with expressions of shock from the relatives who had believed these stories and acted on them during previous family gatherings. But the most devastating revelation was still to come. I explained to Tyler that Grace had been using my actual childhood achievements as her own backstory when talking about her high school and college experiences. The programming competitions, academic awards, and university scholarship offers that Grace had claimed as her own accomplishments were actually mine stolen and repurposed to make her seem more impressive to her boyfriend. Tyler's reaction was immediate and visible. His face went through a series of expressions as he processed the implications of what he was hearing. He had been dating someone who not only lied about her family relationships, but had literally stolen her brother's achievements to enhance her own reputation. The foundation of their relationship was built on fundamental deceptions about Grace's character and background. Uncle Mike whistled again, but this time the sound carried amazement at the scope of Grace's lies rather than surprise at my success. He asked Grace directly whether she had really been telling people I was a failure while simultaneously using my accomplishments to impress her boyfriend. His construction worker directness cut through any possibility of Grace deflecting or minimizing what she had done. Grace's attempts to defend herself only made the situation worse. She claimed that she had been protecting me from family disappointment by downplaying my struggles, and that she had only mentioned a few academic achievements from high school to help Tyler understand her background better. But her explanations sounded hollow and contradictory when compared to the specific lies that multiple relatives had just confirmed hearing from her. Cousin David, still reading through news articles about my company on his phone, asked Grace why she had never mentioned that her brother was featured in the Wall Street Journal as one of the year's most innovative entrepreneurs. His question highlighted The absurdity of Grace's claim that she had been protecting me. Successful entrepreneurs generally benefit from having their achievements recognized rather than hidden. The conversation attracted more relatives as word spread through the party that something dramatic was happening near the gift table. Aunt Patricia approached with several other family members, asking what everyone was discussing so intensely. When Uncle Mike summarized the situation, explaining about my secret success and Grace's lies, the newcomers reacted with the same mixture of amazement and confusion that had characterized everyone else's response. But the most significant development was Tyler's visible withdrawal from Grace's side. He had been standing close to her throughout the early part of the evening, presenting a united front as the happy couple meeting her extended family. Now he stepped back, creating physical distance that reflected his emotional processing of the lies he had discovered. Grace noticed Tyler's withdrawal and became even more desperate in her attempts to control the narrative. She accused me of being cruel and vindictive, claiming that I was deliberately humiliating her in front of everyone she cared about. Her voice carried genuine distress, but it was the distress of someone whose carefully constructed facade was being stripped away rather than the hurt of someone who had been genuinely wronged. I maintained my calm demeanor while pointing out that Grace was the one who had chosen to spread lies about my life for years, while stealing credit for my actual achievements. I had simply answered Grandma Helen's question honestly about where I lived, and the truth had emerged naturally from there. If Grace felt humiliated, it was because her own deceptions were being revealed, not because I had done anything malicious. Tyler finally spoke up, addressing Grace directly in front of the assembled family members. His voice was quiet but clear as he told Grace that he needed to understand why she had lied to him about so many important things. He specifically mentioned the stories about her programming background and academic achievements, noting that their entire relationship had been built on false information about her character and values. The public nature of Tyler's questions created the most uncomfortable moment of the entire evening. Grace was being forced to confront the consequences of her lies in front of both her family and her boyfriend, with no possibility of managing the narrative or controlling the information flow. The charismatic confidence that had always defined her social interactions was crumbling under the weight of exposed deceptions. Grace's final attempt to salvage the situation involved accusing me of abandoning the family and keeping secrets that hurt everyone who cared about me. She claimed that my success meant nothing if I wasn't willing to share it with the people who loved me, and that my secretive behavior proved I didn't really care about family relationships. But Grandma Helen, who had been listening to the entire confrontation with the wisdom of 8 decades, finally spoke up to defend me. She pointed out that Grace had been actively spreading lies about my life while simultaneously stealing credit for my achievements, making it understandable that I might not feel comfortable sharing personal information with family members who were treating me so poorly. Grandma Helen's support carried enormous weight within our family dynamics. As the matriarch whose birthday we were celebrating, her perspective on the situation could not be dismissed or argued against. When she made it clear that she believed Grace had behaved badly while I had simply protected myself from further mistreatment, the family's sympathy shifted decisively in my direction. Tyler made his final decision in that moment. He told Grace that he needed time to think about everything he had learned and that he would be leaving the party early to process the implications of her deceptions. His departure was quiet but definitive, marking the end of a relationship that had been built on fundamental lies about Grace's character and background. Grace was left standing in front of her extended family, exposed as someone who had spent years lying about her own brother while stealing his achievements to enhance her reputation with others. The golden child status she had enjoyed for decades was evaporating in real time, replaced by disappointment and disapproval from relatives who were finally seeing her true character. 3 months after Grandma Helen's birthday party, my relationship with my family had undergone a complete transformation that none of us could have imagined possible. The dramatic revelation of my success and Grace's lies had created an opportunity for genuine healing and growth that went far deeper than simply correcting misconceptions about my career achievements. Robert and Linda took the initiative in rebuilding our relationship, reaching out within days of the party to schedule a private dinner where we could discuss everything that had happened without the pressure of extended family dynamics. They chose a quiet restaurant in downtown Chicago, and I could see the nervousness in their faces as they struggled to find words for emotions they had never had to express before. My father began by acknowledging that they had failed me as parents in ways that went beyond simply not recognizing my achievements. He admitted that their favoritism toward Grace had been obvious and hurtful, and that they had allowed their own social preferences to blind them to my actual strengths and contributions. His voice carried genuine remorse as he described realizing how much damage they had done through years of neglect and dismissive treatment. Linda was even more emotional in her apologies, explaining how the revelation of Grace's lies had forced her to recognize how little she actually knew about my life and personality. She had believed Grace's stories about my failures not because they were credible, but because she had never bothered to develop an independent relationship with me that would have made such lies obviously false. But more importantly, they committed to family therapy sessions designed to address the underlying dynamics that had created such a toxic situation. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a family counselor with experience in sibling rivalry and parental favoritism, helped us navigate conversations that should have happened years earlier but had been avoided due to discomfort and denial. The therapy sessions revealed how much pain I had been carrying from decades of being treated as less important than Grace. I had internalized the family's dismissive treatment to the point where I genuinely questioned my own worth despite achieving objective success that exceeded anything Grace had accomplished. Learning to accept genuine love and attention from my parents required unlearning years of protective emotional distance. Grace's journey was more complicated and painful, but ultimately led to genuine transformation that surprised everyone, including herself. The immediate aftermath of the birthday party was devastating for her. Tyler's breakup was just the beginning of consequences that rippled through multiple areas of her life. Her employer launched an investigation into the programming background she had claimed during her hiring process, discovering that she had misrepresented her educational achievements and technical skills on her resume and during interviews. While the lies weren't serious enough to constitute criminal fraud, they were sufficient grounds for termination from her marketing position. The loss of both her relationship and her job within a week of the birthday party forced Grace to confront the reality that her entire adult identity had been built on deceptions and stolen achievements. She moved back into our parents' house temporarily, experiencing for the first time in her life the kind of social invisibility and family disappointment that I had endured for years. But rather than wallowing in self-pity or continuing to blame others for her situation, Grace made a decision that demonstrated genuine maturity and growth. She enrolled in individual therapy with Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a specialist in personality disorders and pathological lying, to understand why she had felt compelled to construct such elaborate falsehoods about her own and my accomplishments. The therapy revealed that Grace's lies had stemmed from deep insecurities about her own intelligence and long-term prospects. Despite her natural charisma and social skills, she had always worried that she lacked the substantial talents needed for meaningful achievement. Rather than working to develop those talents, she had chosen to steal credit for my accomplishments while diminishing my reputation to make herself feel superior by comparison. Grace's genuine apology came 6 weeks after the birthday party, during a family therapy session, where she took full responsibility for years of lies and manipulation without making excuses or blaming external circumstances. She acknowledged that her behavior had been cruel and calculated, designed to protect her ego at my expense while maintaining her status as the favored child. More importantly, she committed to making concrete amends for the damage she had caused. She contacted every extended family member who had received false information about my life, correcting the lies and explaining how she had misrepresented my achievements and circumstances. She also reached out to Tyler and his friends, admitting that she had stolen my background to enhance her own reputation in their social circle. The process of rebuilding trust was gradual and required consistent demonstration of change behavior over time. Grace found a new job as an entry-level customer service representative, accepting a significant pay cut and lower status position, while she worked to rebuild her reputation honestly. She also enrolled in evening programming classes, genuinely attempting to develop some of the technical skills she had previously only claimed to possess. My own personal growth during this period focused on learning to accept genuine love and recognition from family members who had previously overlooked me. For years, I had protected myself from disappointment by maintaining emotional distance and low expectations. Opening myself to authentic family relationships required vulnerability that felt dangerous after decades of being dismissed and undervalued. But the rewards of this emotional risk were profound. Robert began asking detailed questions about my work and company, demonstrating genuine interest in my thoughts about technology and entrepreneurship. Linda started calling regularly to check on my well-being, expressing the kind of maternal concern I had always craved but never received. The extended family's transformation was equally significant. Uncle Mike became one of my strongest supporters, bragging about my success to his construction crews and referring friends to use the Authentic app. Aunt Susan invited me to family gatherings, specifically to discuss my work and perspectives, treating me as an adult whose opinions were worth hearing, rather than a child who should be seen but not heard. My success with Authentic continued growing throughout this period of family healing. The app reached 20 million users and attracted acquisition offers from major tech companies that valued our platform at over $100 million. But more importantly, I was receiving recognition from industry leaders who appreciated my vision for authentic human connection in an increasingly superficial digital world. I used my newfound wealth and platform to establish the Overlooked Achievers Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting young people whose talents and achievements were being ignored or undervalued in their family or school environments. The foundation provided scholarships, mentorship, and emotional support for kids who, like me, were accomplishing significant things but not receiving appropriate recognition or encouragement. The foundation's work became deeply meaningful to me because it addressed the root cause of my own childhood pain while preventing other young people from experiencing similar neglect. Our mentorship program paired overlooked achievers with successful adults who could provide both practical guidance and emotional validation that was missing from their other relationships. Grace eventually became involved with the foundation's work, using her natural people skills to help identify young people who were being dismissed or undervalued despite their talents. Her personal experience with lying and manipulation made her particularly effective at spotting cases where family dynamics were preventing children from receiving appropriate support for their achievements. The family's Christmas celebration that year marked the complete transformation of our relationships. For the first time in my adult life, I was genuinely excited to attend a family gathering rather than dreading hours of being ignored and dismissed. Grace and I collaborated on a special gift for Grandma Helen, creating a digital photo album that combined my technical skills with her organizational abilities. My speech at the Chicago Tech Entrepreneurs Conference in February focused on the importance of family support for young innovators, drawing on my own experience of succeeding despite rather than because of family encouragement. The speech was covered by several business publications and led to speaking opportunities where I could share insights about overcoming family dynamics that discourage rather than support achievement. But the most meaningful moment of personal growth came during a quiet conversation with Grandma Helen on her 81st birthday, exactly 1 year after the revelation that had changed everything. She told me that she had always known I was special and had been waiting for the right moment to help me show the family who I really was. Her question about where I lived had been intentional, designed to create an opportunity for me to reveal my success when I felt ready. Grandma Helen explained that she had watched me being overlooked and undervalued for years, but had also observed my quiet determination and genuine character. She knew that my achievements, when they came, would be substantial because they were built on authentic effort rather than inherited advantages or stolen credit. Her faith in my potential had never wavered even when I doubted myself. The life lesson that emerged from this entire experience was profound and multifaceted. I learned that family relationships can change dramatically when people choose growth over comfort, honesty over convenience, and genuine connection over surface level harmony. Being overlooked had actually been a gift because it had forced me to develop authentic self-worth rather than depending on external validation. Grace learned that sustainable success requires building real skills and genuine achievements rather than manipulating perceptions and stealing credit from others. Her natural charisma and social intelligence were valuable assets, but they needed to be combined with substance and integrity to create lasting satisfaction and meaningful relationships. Our parents learned that favoritism and neglect can damage family relationships in ways that persist for decades, but that sincere apologies and consistent changed behavior can rebuild trust even after serious harm has been done. They also discovered that their quiet, introverted son had depths and achievements they had never bothered to explore. Today, my relationship with my family is stronger and more authentic than it has ever been. We have regular dinners where my perspectives and experiences are valued and discussed. Grace and I have developed a genuine sibling friendship based on mutual respect rather than competition and lies. Our parents express pride in both of their children for different but equally valid reasons. The Authentic app continues to help millions of people form meaningful relationships based on genuine compatibility rather than superficial attraction. The foundation supports hundreds of young achievers who might otherwise remain overlooked and undervalued. My personal net worth has grown to over $60 million, but more importantly, I have learned to value myself appropriately regardless of external recognition or financial success. The penthouse overlooking Central Park has become a gathering place for family celebrations where everyone's achievements are recognized and appreciated. Grace brings her new boyfriend a fellow customer service representative who values her honesty and genuine personality rather than fabricated accomplishments. Tyler occasionally attends these gatherings as a friend, having forgiven Grace for her lies while maintaining clear boundaries about their relationship. Most significantly, I have learned that being treated like background noise was never a reflection of my actual worth or potential. It was a temporary circumstance created by family dynamics and one person's insecurities, not a permanent judgment about my value as a human being. The quiet strength I developed during those years of being overlooked became the foundation for achievements that exceeded anything I could have imagined when I was living in that tiny studio apartment, eating ramen noodles and coding 18 hours a day. The story ends not with revenge or dramatic confrontation, but with genuine healing and growth that transformed everyone involved. Sometimes the people who overlook us are not enemies to be defeated, but family members who need help learning to see clearly. And sometimes the greatest victory is not proving others wrong, but creating space for everyone to become better versions of themselves. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family, like your achievements didn't matter as much as someone else's? Have you experienced the pain of being overlooked while watching others receive praise for lesser accomplishments? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below about overcoming family dynamics that didn't serve you and how you found your own path to recognition and success. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button to help other people who might be feeling overlooked find this message of hope. Consider subscribing for more stories about ordinary people who overcame extraordinary family challenges to build meaningful lives. And please share this video with anyone who might need to hear that being underestimated is often the first step toward proving everyone wrong in the best possible way. Thank you for listening to my story and allowing me to share this journey from being background noise to finding my authentic voice. Remember that your worth is not determined by other people's ability to recognize it, and that the quiet strength you build during difficult times often becomes the foundation for achievements beyond your wildest dreams. Keep building, keep growing, and keep believing in yourself even when others cannot see your potential yet.